The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So we all know it's Groundhog Day, and whether Puxatawny Phil saw his shadow or didn't see his shadow, it's been Groundhog Day for over a week. Freezing cold. Snow that won't go away. We're not supposed to crack 40 until next week. Schools are out for the second week in a row. Enough already. It's Groundhog Day. Every day is the same. All right, enough fetching. It's Super Bowl week. Yay! Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots. Who had that? Well, we got it on Sunday, and Seattle is a favorite in this game with the much-discarded Sam Darnold, who gave an interview with Dan Patrick on Friday. We will play some of that in the next hour. And, you know, it's funny. You think about Super Bowl week this year versus last year. And, you know, Commanders realistically weren't close. Yeah, they did get to the NFC Championship game. And you could say, well, you know, take away the 5 turnovers and, you know, maybe they beat the Eagles. No, they weren't going to beat the Eagles. And those 5 turnovers, as Dan Quinn accurately pointed out in his postgame news conference, they were the result of what Philadelphia forced. Yeah, they should have done a better job of holding on to the ball, but they really weren't competitive in that game. And the Eagles were the best team, as was evidenced by the way that they beat the 2-time defending champs in the Super Bowl last year. So no Philly this year, no Kansas City, no Buffalo, no Rams. It's 2 teams that matched up 11 years ago with different coaches and different quarterbacks. And I hope it's a good game. You know, that's really what you root for. And the Super Bowl itself, it's really not like a football game, really. I mean, yes, it does determine the best team, and it's the biggest game of the year in any sport and all that. But all the extra hoo-ha that goes along with it makes it really unlike any other game. And if you collect rings like Tom Brady did, they consider you to be the best. If you don't, I mean, is Dan Marino any worse than Tom Brady? Well, if you base it on Super Bowls, yes. If you base it on the eye test, no, I don't think so. And if Dan Marino winds up with Bill Belichick, who knows what happens? It winds up in an organization like the Patriots. And look at the Patriots. When they go down, they don't go down for long. They chased Bill Belichick away just, 2 years ago? They had one bad year last year, and this year they're back in the Super Bowl. So we'll spend a lot of time on it this week. There's the usual stuff this week. They used to do the Commissioner's News Conference on Friday. I guess they feel there's enough news coming out of there, or news that they can control. So the commissioner does his news conference now on Monday. We also used to have on Tuesday what was called Media Day, though every day at the Super Bowl is Media Day. But it was the day for pictures. Teams now arrive Saturday or Sunday before the Super Bowl. They never arrive on Monday anymore. And it was travel day Monday. You get there, you get settled, and then Tuesday everybody shows up on the field in uniform, or not with pads, but in their jerseys, and they do series of interviews. It's a crazy day. You've seen the coverage of it a million times over the years. I've been to a couple of dozen of them. Not very exciting after a while, but it's all part of the hype picture. And get an hour with each team. They have podiums set up for the star players and the coaches, and then they spread out the rest of the guys throughout the stadium. And I always look for players who had some kind of connection to Washington or had a really good story. And, I do that. And I enjoyed it for a while, but I haven't been to a Super Bowl since 2013. The last time I went to a Super Bowl, it was the Harbaugh brothers, and they met in New Orleans. That was when the lights went out, and the Ravens won that Super Bowl. And, man, think of the journeys of the two brothers. John stayed until just this past season with Baltimore. Now he's in New York. And Jim went back to Michigan, won a national title there, and now he's back in the NFL with the Chargers. And just a passage of time. As if I need to talk more about the passage of time and needed to feel any older. I don't know whether you saw this, but the Raiders look like they found their coach. And it's a Kubiak, but it's not Gary Kubiak, who is younger than I am. It's his son, Clint Kubiak, who is 38 years old. And the Raiders are expected to announce this after the Super Bowl. The NFL doesn't like to be, the Super Bowl to be upstaged with head coach hiring announcements. So the expectation is right after the Super Bowl, we'll find out that Clint Kubiak will be the third coach for the Raiders in 3 seasons and the 5th full-time coach since they moved to Las Vegas in 2020. A lot of turnover there with Mark Davis. But I saw his dad. I saw Gary Kubiak, who led the Broncos to a Super Bowl championship and was forever the backup to John Elway in Denver. I saw him play a high school game for a private school in Houston. This is my first job, 1978, and I'd been the voice of the Bridge City Cardinals. And when their season came to an end, we picked up the playoff games for the local teams, and one of them was a private school called Bishop Byrne. And Bishop Byrne played Gary Kubiak's school in a playoff game, and I broadcast that. And let me tell you, he looked like Marino at that level. Went on to have a really good college career at Texas A&M and hung around the NFL for a long time. Never really established himself as a starter, but when you're playing behind John Elway, it's kind of understandable. But did become a very good coach, offensive coordinator for the Ravens and other teams, and then a head coach for the Broncos when they won their last Super Bowl. So we'll get to more on that as the week goes on, and lots of reaction to what is being said as if any of it's going to be meaningful, but I'll give you my interpretation of it as we roll along. I'll give you my interpretation of Maryland basketball. Ugh, my God. I mean, we've seen drop-offs before, but not like this. I mean, this was a Sweet 16 team last year. Well, that team's not there anymore. Kevin Willard left. He took with him who he wanted and took some other players from other places. And I don't even know if he's got a high school recruit on his team. Maryland does. But Buzz Williams comes in, and he comes in late because Maryland did make it all the way to the Sweet 16. And then there was big drama with Willard. I think it may have taken 2 weeks. Might have taken 2 weeks after they were eliminated in the Sweet 16 to get everything done. They gave him what he wanted, and he still left. And as Scott Van Pelt put it very well, he said, "We didn't mind you leaving. We just didn't like it that you took a dump on the front step." And, he and Willard got into it a little bit, and Willard's done very well. He got what he wanted. He wanted to go to a school that didn't dedicate money to football or much of it, and he's at Villanova, and he's winning there, and he's going to be in the NCAA tournament and may make a deep run again. Maryland is not going to be in the NCAA tournament. In fact, they are putrid right now. They have lost 4 games by 30 points or more. They have lost 13 games on the season. 12 of them have been by double digits. And yesterday, they had their worst loss ever since moving into Xfinity Center, which was the season after they won the national championship in 2002. So they've been there since 2002, and yesterday's 30-point blowout loss to Purdue was the worst. There was some excitement there, mostly pregame, because the students were finally back. They get like the longest break in America at Maryland, but the students were back, and it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Cancer Awareness Month, and so they had students in the crowd dressed in pink T-shirts, and the team wore white uniforms, but the lettering and the numbers were all in pink. And Buzz Williams wore pink sneakers with his usual outfit, which is a 3-piece suit. And he gave you what was the highlight of the day in this awful loss was the atmosphere.
I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
I should have said that at the start. I know I don't ever have an opening statement because I just try to answer the storylines of the narratives you guys are creating, and maybe that's wrong. I was very appreciative, and without talking to our players, because after I waved to my wife and daughter after the national anthem, I don't really pay attention, and I know I'm the new guy here, but I thought the ambiance, the pink shirts, the crowd, the students, it speaks to the history of this program. It speaks to the support and the care of the community on and off campus. I thought it was tremendous. I thought it was the best environment of any game that I have coached in Xfinity thus far. And so considering we need to be way better in every possible way for them to show up on Sunday afternoon. I know everybody went to church, but hurry up after church and get over here. I thought it was elite.
I would point out to you, Buzz, that not everyone went to church. I'm sure some did, and the 1 o'clock tip may have been a bit of an issue getting there in time. I don't know. But the fact that you had people at all there is somewhat of a surprise given how your team has played this year. And it was 13-0 at the beginning of the game. Okay, Purdue basically blew them off the floor to start the game. In the first half, Maryland did not have an offensive rebound. Here's more Buzz.
In the second half, it was better, but we shot more balls in the second half, partly because we got more offensive rebounds. But we have to salvage on both sides of the ball. We're making progress at times when the ball's on the ground, but we have to stop when the ball's in the air, giving it to allowing the other team to get it as often as they are. And when we shoot it, we need our shots to be more predictable so we have a chance to get it at a higher rate.
Yeah. What we're seeing, I think, from Maryland and what we're hearing from the coach is this. We know it's a lost year. We know we're not a competitive team. So for players that are going to be back next year, and who knows who's going to be back. It's not like it used to be. Oh, he's got 3 years of eligibility. He's got 2 years of eligibility. No. They have eligibility, and they have loopholes to get more eligibility. They can hang around college for 7 or 8 years if they get the right setups here. So it's more this year about developing something, and he knows, look, they're not going to get rid of him after 1 year. There's just too much money that would have to be paid out, and he hasn't done anything to embarrass the school in any way. The team is somewhat of an embarrassment on the floor, but off the floor, he doesn't have any incidents or anything like that. He hasn't had to kick players off the team. They've had a lot of injuries, including to their top scorer. Payne has been out most of the year, in and out with injuries, and probably has played, 8 or 9 games at most this year. So he's had that. But I think this is really telling from Darius Adams, who, if you're not familiar with, I can understand, because he's brand new like everybody else, 15 new players. But he's kind of an oddity in college basketball these days. He's a freshman who was playing high school basketball last year. Yeah, he came to Maryland from high school, didn't stop at like 3 junior colleges and 2 other schools before he got there. No, he's actually a freshman. And Darius Adams said this after this latest 30-point blowout.
We're not really focused on the outcome. We're focused on us getting better every single day, and that's going to make the outcome different. So I don't think obviously there's frustration just because we're losing, but I don't think it's going to be a big thing. I think we're all just locked in, trying to just get better every single day, just so things like this doesn't happen anymore.
Well, don't say it's not a big thing. This is Maryland basketball, and to be 1-9 in the league and staring down the barrel of being 1-19, because I think they have 10 league games left to go. That is a big thing. You got to be better than that. And there have been some years where there's, the post-Bob Wade mess where they went on probation. Gary had him competitive at least. Now, he was able to keep Walt Williams, which I don't know if he'd be able to do today, but he did. And the players that he put out on the floor, no matter who they were, they Evers, Burns, names like that, guys who were never going to get a sniff of the NBA, they played hard. And I don't sense that with this team. And part of it is the whole setup in college basketball. You could, in the old days, threaten guys with playing time. And if they wanted to leave, it was tough to leave because you had to sit out a year. Sitting out a full year at age 19 or 20 is tough. Some guys do it. Some guys did it. They don't have to do it anymore. But now you come and go as you want. It's not held against you, whatever happened in the last program. Yeah, he kept me on the bench, but, we had problems. We had issues. Go someplace new. You don't like it, go someplace new. So there's where we are. And this is the result of the way college basketball works in this era. Now, I guess it's possible with a full off season that Buzz Williams will have, and looking at the players that he's brought in, the 15 players, he'll cherry pick a few that he wants to keep, and we'll probably have a dozen new players next year, or 10. But we'll have basically a new year and a new team every year. That's the way it's going to be. And I guess it's easy to eventually get your arms around a team, but the days of watching a star player for 3 years and sometimes 4, that's gone. That's completely gone. Julian Reese will go down as the last. I don't think there will ever be a starting player. There may be some guy who's, a walk-on or plays only a little bit of game and knows that there's not a better situation out there for him. But a 4-year starter at the same school, or at least at Maryland, I don't see it happening again. That was the end of the old era mixing with the new, and this is what we get. We get a year like this, and it's a year that they're telling. When you hear Darius Adams say, don't focus on the result, he's heard that. And he knows that the expectation is you don't find a way to win the game. You try, but you're overmatched against teams like Purdue and Michigan State, who gave him a 30-point blowout in the last game. And it's frustrating because, now's when I come up for air. We got only one more Sunday of football. And then I'm a baseball fan. I watch baseball for sure. But that doesn't really start until April, and then you got hockey. And I'm honestly not a big hockey fan. I will watch the Caps in the playoffs. The Wizards are putrid this year. I find other NBA regular season not very good. I enjoy watching the local college basketball teams, and I enjoy watching Maryland. This year, impossible to watch because you turn it on, and it's like 16-2. What's the point? And aside from this oasis that we had a couple of weeks ago where Diggy Coit went for 43 in the blowout of the team that's the only team worse than them in the Big Ten, and that's Penn State, there's been a lot of this. Again, 12 of the 13 losses by double digits. They're not, losing games at the buzzer. They're losing games where they're completely overmatched. All right, enough ranting about Maryland basketball. I did mention hockey, and I don't talk much about hockey regular season, Ovechkin chasing a record or something like that. But they had another one of these outdoor games. Here's another thing about these outdoor games. When they first had them, it's at least 15 years ago, they did one on New Year's Day, and it was new. Now they have them all the time, and they have them in places like Tampa. And I guess looking at the NFL schedule, they go, oh, wow, a Sunday without football. Let's do this. And to the people of Tampa, their credit, they showed up. They had 65,000 people in the stands watching an outdoor hockey game in a warm weather climate, though it's, cold in Florida now because of what we're going through here. But they came back against the Bruins. Less than 9 minutes to go in the second period. Bruins were up 5-2, and a fight happened. Oh, okay, big deal. Fights happen all the time. Fight between the goalies. The goalies for the two teams went at it. That seemed to spark the Lightning, and they went on to beat the Bruins in overtime. So we had. I just wonder. In a shootout, not overtime, but it was shootout. I just wonder, did the goalie fight happen because they were playing in front of 65,000 people and a national TV audience? A lot of hockey games are played in relative obscurity. I just wonder if that led to that. I don't know enough about hockey to tell you, but I just found that to be pretty incredible. That if you are a hockey fan, you are aware of this. But a fight between goalies in the Tampa game against Boston last night with 65,000 people watching outdoors. Kind of a sugar. All right, coming up, we will get to more on the Super Bowl, including a conversation that Dan Patrick had with Seahawks quarterback Sam Darnold. Don't go away. As someone who values sports history, it frustrates me when you hear people talk about great players and they limit it to, especially the post-Sports Center era. Anything that happened before 1979 when Sports Center debuted, it didn't really happen. Dick Butkus, retired in 1973. Wilt Chamberlain, same year. Who remembers them? Well, they're among the greatest of all time. And when it comes to coaching, even though his name is on the trophy that they give to the Super Bowl champion, I think we're starting to creep into an era where Vince Lombardi is getting short shrift. And before the end of the show, I'm going to make the case that he is still the greatest coach of all time. Yeah, he only won 2 Super Bowls. Well, he only coached in the first 2 and took a year off, became a general manager of the Packers, hated that, and took over as coach of the Redskins, and sadly died of cancer when he was 57 years old. You discount that he won 3 NFL championships when there was no Super Bowl prior to the start of the Super Bowl in January of 1967. In fact, he won his 5 championships, including those 2 Super Bowls, over 7 years. And it just gets forgotten because it's pre-Sports Center. So I'll do that later in the show. This was news over the weekend. It was a Friday news dump, so it didn't get a lot of attention. And I guess if you're not in Minnesota or not a big fan of the Vikings, you may not have paid a lot of attention to this. But the Minnesota Vikings fired their general manager. And that's not unusual at the end of a non-playoff season that a team will fire the general manager. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, he got fired. Odd timing on this since the season's been over for the Vikings for about a month. But when you have a team that doesn't achieve, it happens. And it was cited, his poor draft record. Looks like J.J. McCarthy is yet to blossom, and that may turn out to be a bust. And according to the Athletics' Diana Rossini, he rubbed some people the wrong way when he spent 2 weeks away from the Vikings on paternity leave after the birth of his first child during training camp. He continued to work remotely. And look, I've been to a bunch of training camps. The general managers are sometimes there, but they do a lot of standing around. I don't know what the purpose of that is. Their job is to get players. So he was doing stuff at home while he was helping out with the birth of his child. This is how things are done these days. I didn't take paternity leave for either of my 2 kids, but nowadays they give it out routinely in workplaces. And had I been a new father these days, I certainly would have taken some of it. But his decision, according to Diana Rossini, was met with disbelief by other coaches and general managers. Now, they do have a policy on paternity leave, which goes back well over 30 years. I'll get to that in a moment. But it's legal, but it's frowned upon. And it becomes more frowned upon when you're coming off a 14-3 season and you don't make it to the playoffs. They also had Daniel Jones at the end of last year. They chose not to re-sign him. He had a terrific season for the Colts before he got hurt. They didn't sign Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how interested Rodgers would have been, although it was speculated that was his first choice. He didn't go there. He went to the Steelers, and they made the playoffs. And then they thought about Joe Flacco and Ryan Tannehill. Instead, they traded for Sam Howell. Remember Sam Howell here. And brought in Carson Wentz. So that didn't work out. And J.J. McCarthy was hurt a lot of the year, and that was a problem as well. Now, the latest is they're not planning to replace him. But in terms of the way he rubbed people the wrong way, according to Diana Rossini, by taking paternity leave, this goes back to 1993. If you want to Google Babygate NFL, you will find the name David Williams. David Williams was a starting tackle, offensive tackle for the Houston Oilers. They were still in Houston in 1993 before they moved to Tennessee. And they had a game. They had a game on the weekend at New England. Long flight from Houston to Foxborough. So his wife went into labor on Saturday, which is the day the teams usually leave before a Sunday game, and he didn't make the flight. And there was no commercial flights to get him to New England in time, so he stayed home and was with his wife and new child. Well, he was fined by the organization $111,000, and this became an enormous deal. I remember this very well. I was working with Sam Huff. Nobody was more old school than Sam. And Sam said, well, when I was playing for the Giants, my wife went into labor. I just dropped her off at the hospital and went to practice. That was kind of the mindset at the time. But in 1993, things were starting to change. And it was a huge controversy. What? They're fining him for being with his wife and child at birth? Missing one of the great life events? and they deducted $111,000 from his pay. That was a game check for him. He didn't play, so that was what he was making per game in 1993, and didn't get it. He wound up missing very few games, played for the Oilers for 7 years, 89 to 95, played a couple more years with the Jets, and retired after the 97 season. But during his 9-year career, he played in 128 games and started 106 of them. It's not like he's missing a lot of games. And on top of that, the Oilers were a better team. They finished 12-4 that year. They were upset in the divisional playoffs by Joe Montana and the Kansas City Chiefs. This was after he'd left San Francisco. And they beat New England in that game 28-14. And New England was bad. First year under Bill Parcells, they finished 5-11. Not too good. So here we are in 2025, going into 2026, and it's still frowned upon to do what the NFL kind of refigured after Babygate, after the David Williams incident. Now, I guess if this ever gets to a courtroom, would the Vikings be required? I mean, there's already probably money left on his contract anyway, so I don't know if there'd be any kind of a remuneration for the general manager. But, still thinking all these years later, 33 years later, we got some of this stuff still going on. Pretty strange. How about this one as we get ready for the draft? We have the Senior Bowl, or just had it, in Mobile, Alabama, and that's where they start looking really closely at the draft prospects. And you know that the Raiders have so-called earned the number 1 pick by being the stinkiest team in the league, and the Jets are at number 2, and both teams are in need of quarterbacks, and it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Fernando Mendoza of Indiana is going number 1 to the Raiders. But Daniel Jeremiah, who covers the NFL for the NFL Network and specifically the draft, was on with Rich Eisen on Friday and said this about the Jets at number 2 and Mendoza on the board before he goes number 1.
I think the Jets would effort with all the picks that they've accumulated to try and see if they could pry that pick away from the Raiders. And the buzz down here amongst all the teams is there's no chance the Raiders would trade off of that pick.
You think the Jets would trade up for Fernando Mendoza?
I 100% think they would.
No kidding.
100%.
Whoa.
Yeah,
but they're not ready either. They're not ready either.
No, but it's not going to. It's irrelevant because they're not going to pass up an opportunity to get Mendoza. I don't think the Raiders would do that.
So Mendoza people have fallen that deep in love with Fernando Mendoza atop this draft.
Oh, yeah, I think the way he finished everything up. And, I mean, Rich, like, to me, when you look at how he did on some big third downs, you look at how he did in the red zone, you look at how he did in big moments after getting drilled. We talked about that on Sunday,
right?
Just how he's reacted to that. So you get accuracy, you get toughness, you get somebody who's been big in big moments. That's a pretty good place to start. Oh, by the way, he's 6'5", he's big. You saw on the big touchdown run, he can move around enough. And I don't know that there's ever been a quarterback more equipped to not be distracted by Las Vegas than Fernando Mendoza.
Okay. So the Jets are going to try, and it's not going to – because I honestly thought, DJ, that the Jets getting picks in next year's draft is when they're going to be targeting their quarterback, and that may happen anyway. But you're saying it's because it won't be for a lack of trying to have the Raiders move off of Mendoza.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of that's the buzz down here was that, hey, the Jets, I mean, I'm not saying they would trade all their picks that they've accumulated, but, they're this close to being able to get a guy that they would, try and make an effort to do that. But it would be a moot point because they're not going to move off of it, that the Raiders seem to be pretty in love with Fernando Mendoza, did their homework. Obviously, we saw who was in attendance for the national championship game. And when you're in a position like this, there's a, it looks like a really intriguing group coming up next year, but there's no guarantee you're going to be in the right position to be able to get that guy. So right now you're sitting on a guy that has all the, the measurables, has the intangibles. I don't see the Raiders listening to any of those offers.
That's Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network. They might actually listen, but putting out that message is good for leverage. How much are the Jets willing to pay to move up for this quarterback? And you just don't know. I mean, until this year, I certainly he wasn't on the first round radar. I don't even know if he was going to be a first or a second day pick. Certainly not a first day pick, maybe second day and maybe third. But now number one, and the Raiders are going to say no to everybody. Well, we'll see. And the brain trust was there to see it up close. Mark Davis went with Tom Brady and watched the championship game. And, in big moments, that's what you're looking for. I don't think you could perform much better than Fernando Mendoza did against Miami to win the national championship. So we'll keep an eye on that as, and things change. And one thing I learned working with Mel Kiper, it's a long way to the draft from the end of the season. Season will wrap up on Sunday. We don't do the draft until late April. And in that time, people change their minds a million times. It's not an exact science. It's a good guessing game. You do the best you can. But what Jeremiah is saying today might be different a month from now or even 2 months from now. Hall of Fame. We'll finally find out the people who are getting in the Hall of Fame this weekend. It's been reported, and that was a big story that carried us through the end of the week last week, that Bill Belichick did not make it. And then the separate category, which is called the modern-day candidates, players who have been out of football for less than 30 years. I think it's you get the 5-year waiting period, and then it's 25 years after you become eligible before your name is taken off the ballot. And last year, Eli Manning became eligible for the first time, didn't make it, and now reports are that he didn't make it again. We'll find out for sure on Saturday, but as of now, it's being reported that Eli didn't make it, even with the 2 Super Bowls. So Peter King was on Pro Football Talk, and he believes, and he covered the Giants as much as any team, because I think he lived in New York most of the time that Eli was playing. He lived in Boston some, but I think he covers the league, and he's probably been the most influential voice of Hall of Fame voters, no longer a voter now that he's retired. But he was on with Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk, and this is his thoughts on Eli and the Hall of Fame.
I would vote for Eli for the Hall of Fame, but I understand the reason why many people don't believe he's a Hall of Famer. He was never a first-team All-Pro quarterback. He won playoff games in 2 seasons. Now, he had 2 of the greatest runs a quarterback's had. I mean, when you think about it, in those 2 seasons, 2007, 2011, 8 playoff games. He's 8-0, and only one of them is played in the Meadowlands. So basically he wins 7 either road games or neutral site games, and he beats the maybe the greatest coach of all time and maybe the greatest quarterback of all time, maybe the greatest player of all time. In both of those seasons, for both of those Super Bowls, making huge throws in the fourth quarter of each game. And, look, David Tyree and Mario Manningham are not going down in NFL history other than for those catches that they made in the fourth quarters of those 2 games. So I think it's a bit of a unicorn career, and I would vote for Eli Manning for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he and Jim Plunkett are the only 2 with 2 Super Bowl wins where they played in the games. Phil Simms has 2 Super Bowl wins, but he didn't play in 25. Ben Roethlisberger, I presume, is going to get in at the appropriate time. He's still got a little more time to wait. It's just odd that 2 Super Bowl – you would think that 2 Super Bowl wins would be enough, because a Super Bowl win is a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of Steelers who have busts in Canton who wouldn't have busts in Canton but for the fact that they were on a team that won 4 Super Bowls.
I agree with you, but I am not in the Plunkett camp. I wouldn't vote for Plunkett for the Hall of Fame, because I think that it was such a checkered career. I mean, you have to be, at least Eli Manning in the regular season was whatever he was when he retired. He was 8th or 10th all time in all these categories. And I don't know where Jim Plunkett was, but he's got a significantly negative touchdown to interception ratio. And, how many full seasons did Jim Plunkett even start? 5 or 6. Look, I realize it sounds like I'm dogging Jim Plunkett. I don't particularly think he's a Hall of Fame player, but And I understand why some people don't think Eli Manning is too. I respect that. I just think he is.
Yeah, I would think, be especially the historic win. Like Namath, his numbers, boy, they're not Hall of Fame numbers. He had many more interceptions than touchdowns and was hurt a lot, but he had the seminal victory. He legitimized the merger, AFL-NFL, by beating the heavily favored Baltimore Colts in 1969. Eli knocked off a team that was going for 19-0. That's pretty significant. And then he beat the Patriots again. And Tom Brady had, 3 Super Bowl losses, 2 of them to Eli. So I think that's significant there. In terms of the numbers, both of them were 500 quarterbacks exactly, which is interesting because Eli, 117 and 117 regular season. Jim Plunkett, 72 and 72. Eli had many more touchdowns than interceptions, 316 to 244, whereas Plunkett had 164 touchdowns and 198 interceptions, though I would argue this, that Plunkett's career, which started in 1971, more than 30 years earlier than Eli, was in a different era. There were more interceptions because wide receivers weren't running free like they're allowed to now. The rules changed dramatically in the late stages of his career, and that's where he really flourished. Because remember, Jim Plunkett started out with a bad team, the New England Patriots. He was the number 1 pick of the draft in 71 after winning the Heisman at Stanford. And they traded him to the 49ers because it just wasn't working out in New England. Send him back home to the Bay Area. Had 3 bad seasons with the 49ers. They cut him. He didn't play at all in 1978. Raiders picked him up in 79, and he won 2 Super Bowls with them. And, yeah, the career numbers are not as good. And neither one of them has spectacular win-loss records, both 500. Eli completed 60% of his passes, which in that era is just okay, not the greatest. And Plunkett was a 52% completion percentage. Plunkett made no Pro Bowls, not one. Eli made 4, for whatever that's worth. So, yeah, I mean, I could see Peter's case there that Plunkett's not a Hall of Famer and Eli is. And again, it's only his second year, and maybe there are still those voters who want to say, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer, but he's clearly not his brother who was a slam dunk first ballot guy. Eli's going to have to wait. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's another 2 or 3 years, but I think he will eventually get in. Coming up, Sam Darnold with Dan Patrick as he heads into his first Super Bowl, and also Kevin Stefanski off the coaching go-round, landing in Atlanta, and what it's like to stay there. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So it looks like the hiring cycle is complete, and not a good year for the Rooney Rule at all, because aside from Robert Saleh winding up with the Tennessee Titans, no minority hires, all white guys. Clint Kubiak is expected to fill the Raiders' job once he's through with the Super Bowl. He's the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. What's going on in the country, I'm sure, was not helpful in this, even though the NFL said we're going to stick with the Rooney Rule, but it didn't really work out very well this year. So Kevin Stefanski moves from the Cleveland Browns, where he did a good job, got them to the playoffs with Joe Flacco and actually won a playoff game, and now they decline enough where he's out on the street, but not for long, winds up with the Atlanta Falcons, and talk to Dan Patrick about that transition.
How do you know you're wired to be a head coach?
Great. I don't know. Good question. I don't. It's funny. I didn't set out to have this job. This was not a grand plan. I think fourth grade I wanted to be an architect, if I remember correctly. But yeah, these type of things, what I try to do is keep my head down, do the job I have that's currently in front of me. I was so blessed along the way to be put in positions that where I could grow, and I can't tell you how lucky I was to be at the Vikings, for instance, for 15 seasons and to move my way around that coaching staff. I didn't set out for that. That wasn't the roadmap, but I found myself in this position.
Yeah, because I've said before, there are certain guys who are just meant to be coordinators. When you become a head coach, I mean, you're answering to everybody about everything. You got to be a CEO, and you get further away from what you really love doing and being a coordinator.
It's very interesting. You're right. And I loved my time as a position coach. I loved my time as a coordinator. I remember when I was named a coordinator for the first time, I'm at practice, and I'm walking around during individual periods as the quarterbacks are working and the tight ends are working over here. And where do I go? Where do I fit in here? And then as a head coach, now I'm helping out the defense, or I'm watching special teams. So you're always trying to navigate where you can help. And certainly as you get farther, as you get to the coordinator role or you get to the head coach role, it is easy to get farther away from that. So you have to work very hard to get involved in drills, get involved in meetings, be intentional about that is important.
When you interview with the Falcons, how much is you're interviewing them or them interviewing you?
It's absolutely both. I was very fortunate over the last few weeks to go on some visits, to have some Zooms with different teams, and those were fact-finding missions for me. I've been doing this now. I've been in the league for 20 years, so I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people I'm talking to. We have mutual friends, but I'm trying to find out about these buildings and find out who these people are and what they're about. Obviously, you make your phone calls and you certainly know who they are from other people, but then you sit across from somebody. I think you get a feel for somebody and you talk about what your values are, what they believe in, and see if there's a mesh there, if you will.
How do you use Matt Ryan?
Oh, man, in a lot of ways. And Matt being here in this role was a huge draw for me. That pulled me to this building. Matt's somebody that I've known about for a long time. We both grew up in the Philadelphia area. I've known who Matt is about, what he's about. I know exactly where he is in terms of how he feels and sees this game. And that was important to me because Matt's somebody that I'm going to rely heavily on a day-to-day basis, on a big picture basis, as a thought partner. We hired Ian Cunningham last night as our general manager. So with Ian, with myself, with Matt, we're going to put our heads together as we move forward here. But having a person like Matt that knows this city, that knows what winning is about, that's such a huge deal for me.
Kevin Stefanski, the Falcons head coach. Kirk Cousins' situation. Trying to understand what happened either yesterday or day before. His future with Atlanta is what?
We'll see. That's why we hired Ian Cunningham. Just got in last night, so we'll see on all those type of decisions. Obviously, it's no secret. Kirk and I have a relationship. I think very, very highly of the person. I think very highly of the player. All those type of decisions are something that Ian will get in here, and again, we'll put our heads together on all those type of things. But no secret that Kirk's somebody I have a tremendous amount of respect for.
Non-committal commitment. Yeah, it's not impossible because he's already done that to an extent. Replacing him during the playoffs on the CBS desk. But, it could be that Kirk Cousins replaces Matt Ryan. He's that good. Now, he probably has more football in him, probably wants to play longer. But that's a prime job. And, it might be in his best interest long term if he feels like he's gotten football out of his system. And maybe he hasn't. But if he's reached that point, that's a pretty good spot to jump into for Kirk Cousins. And from what I've seen, he's very good, and the reviews have been very good for him as well. Sam Darnold getting ready to play in the Super Bowl. Man, those are words you would have said 5 years ago, and people would have had you committed. But here he is, a guy who's been discarded. He's played for 4 different teams before landing in Seattle, and now he's taken them to the big game. And he was on with Dan on Friday, and they talked about preparing. They hadn't at that point left for the Bay Area. Now they're there. But this was about preparing for the game in the week leading up to it.
Are you going to learn more from watching Denver against New England or what you guys did against the Rams?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, right? Because that game was a blizzard, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of even tough to see what they're doing on tape just because of, how windy it was and how snowy it was at times. But no, I think, you learn a ton just by watching the other team. Obviously, there's times where you can go back and learn a ton by watching yourself, watching some tendencies that maybe you've shown throughout the year, and you notice some things watching for sure of yourself. But I think, being able to understand kind of what they're doing, especially being, in a different conference and not being able to watch any New England tape throughout this entire season. Like, we just came off the stretch. These last 2 games, we've played these teams 3 times throughout the season. So we had a really good idea of kind of what these defenses looked like. And, I think that goes for a whole team, obviously. So we just got to do a really good job of understanding what New England presents. on defense and what their core is, what they like to do, and then kind of what their wrinkles are in certain situations.
Who reached out to you after the win that might surprise us?
Oh shoot, a cool one was Luke Combs. I had a couple country singers reach out. Luke Combs, Kenny Chesney. Those are some cool ones. Obviously, you have former quarterbacks that reach out there. That is always really cool to be able to hear from guys like that. But yeah, I think the celebrities and the country music singers and different celebrities that kind of reach out to you throughout that whole process that maybe I talked to at a Super Bowl a couple of years ago when I wasn't playing in it, or at a going to the Masters in Augusta, like I might have bumped into a certain person and forgot that I gave them my number. Like just guys that reach out like that. It's so cool to be able to just continue to get people to reach out because I think that kind of makes me understand too, like how important that game was, how important winning that NFC Championship was, and going to the Super Bowl, how big of a deal it is. And I think there's a balance there, right? Because you want to understand, okay, like it's just the next game and it's a process, but at the same time, like I want to enjoy this. I want to enjoy every single moment with my teammates and these coaches and even the media, like doing all the media leading up to the game. Like I want to be able to enjoy it because you never know when you're going to get back here. Yeah. So there is that double-edged sword of kind of understanding to enjoying every single moment, but also kind of preparing and understanding that it is a process and we're going to treat it like the next game.
Talking to Sam Darnold, the Seahawks quarterback. Have you played with a chip on your shoulder at any point in your NFL career?
Dan, being honest with you, like I don't ever felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. I just don't think that's really my personality. I've never been like that, at any point in my life. I've always just worked hard and treated every single day as its own day. I've never, because I feel like just with me personally, like if I got too high or if I got too low, that affected me. That affected performance. So I feel like I was always just better if I just stayed right here, just even keeled. And, that's just kind of who I am. So I think, and that's what you learn throughout your career, right? You learn who you are as a person and what works best for you in preparation and all those things. So for me, it's really important for me to just stay even keeled and I see and I understand what people say throughout the years. And, I understand that, there's some things that have been said about me and people are saying, oh, you've proved the doubters wrong, but that's not for me to say or for me to even really pay attention to, because that at the end of the day, like that doesn't matter and it doesn't affect my performance at all. Like I just got to go out there and do my job every single day. And, because if I do anything other than that, if I think about, the doubters or proving anyone wrong, like I feel like I'm doing my team a disservice because I'm thinking about the wrong things.
Yeah. And everybody wants to talk about your journey. And, right after the game, you're asked about your journey and you're like, my journey continues. I don't know how many people sit there and go, I just won something. Now I got to look back on what happened prior to this. And I thought your answers were mature, but I don't know how you take those questions of, let's talk about the Jets or let's talk about Carolina. Let's talk about all of these, rough moments there when you're trying to focus on the game at hand, the job at hand.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I think just being able to handle it at this point in my career too, I feel like even mentally, like I feel like I handle it a little bit differently internally than I used to. Because I realize like it is a part of the journey and it is a part of who I am. And
what was it like before internally?
Yeah, I think like I gave it a little more thought than I had to. Like I paid a little bit more attention to it. And I guess, I invested a little more thought into kind of what happened in the past. And I tried to, okay, like I threw this pick against this coverage back in 2019, like, I'm not going to do that again. It's like, no, sometimes mistakes happen and, you learn from it and, it's, you don't want to make the same mistakes again, but sometimes throughout your career, especially if it's a long career, like those things are going to happen. But just being able to move on and to learn from those experiences, but move on. And the days in New York, the days in Carolina, like those were those are part of my journey and they're part of my experience. And I loved every single part of it. Like, yeah, there were some lows that sucked. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's part of it though. Like I learned so much from that and, I'm able to move on. And it's funny, like after every single game we lost or things that didn't go well, like I was able to wake up that next day and see the sunrise and go into the building and see my teammates and have fun with my coaches. Like, that's a part of life. And, I think being able to realize that at this point in my career, like it allows you to kind of take it one day at a time and enjoy every single little moment that you get with your teammates. Because as we all say, like we're never with the same team, year in, year out. Yeah, you might be with some of the similar guys, especially if you stick with the same team, but there's never all 70 that are the same throughout a season. So you just try to enjoy it as much as you can.
That's Sam Darnold. And, all the great quarterbacks that they've had go through USC, not all of them have worked out well in the pros, like Matt Leinart, for example. He's the first USC quarterback to start in a Super Bowl. Pretty cool. I think Rodney Peete may have gotten there as a backup. But, Darnold from USC, first USC quarterback. And I don't know whether this is a record or not. I'm sure it'll come out this week. But 5 different teams. We were talking about Jim Plunkett and whether Jim Plunkett deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. The 2 Super Bowls he won with the Raiders, they were with his third team. He'd been drafted by New England. New England traded him to San Francisco. San Francisco cut him. He was out of the league for like a year and a half. He didn't get signed, I don't think, or maybe he was signed at the beginning of the year. But Dan Pastorini was the quarterback when he won his first Super Bowl. Pastorini got hurt, and he came in, and the rest is history. And then the second one that he won was against the Redskins in 1984, January of 84. And Marcus Allen was the MVP of the game. Marcus Allen had, I think, 196 yards rushing or over 190 yards in that Super Bowl. So we'll see what Darnold does and how he lives up to it. A couple quick things. I want to get to the Vince Lombardi story. This is an anniversary. It was on this day in 1959 that the Packers announced that Vince Lombardi was their coach. And I will make the case, or try to make the case, that even all these years later, he coached his last game in 1969. All these years later, he, I think, is still the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. And I'll get to my case on that coming up. But speaking of coaching, Mark Turgeon back. Remember, he got fired. They didn't call it a firing. They said he left. But the parting was kind of a push out the door. It was less than a month into the 2020-21 season. Wow, it's been a long time since he coached. You believe that? Been 5 years? More than 5 years, because it was early in that season. He had just signed a contract extension, but it included a buyout of $5 million. So they gave him $5 million to leave. Danny Manning was his top assistant. He took over for the rest of the year. Kevin Willard came in, coached for 3 years. Now we got Buzz Williams and a dumpster fire going on. Not in the way that dumpster fires are normally thought of. This is just an on-the-court dumpster fire where they routinely get blown out in the last 2 games by more than 30 points. But Turgeon, I think, suffered from this. Turgeon was essentially, you throw out, I think, the 3 years of Bob Wade, which was, in the wake of the Len Bias tragedy and all that. Essentially, he was the third coach. Lefty Driesell created modern Maryland basketball. He came in 1969, the big showman, put seats on the floor, had great teams, never made a Final Four, but Lefty made college basketball in this area. The Bias tragedy forced Lefty out. The chancellor, John Slaughter, decided that he needed to hire a black coach, and he hired Bob Wade, who was an incredible high school coach, but wasn't ready for that level. He was out after 3 years. Last year, won only 9 games and left a probation mess for Gary Williams to clean up. But Gary was an alum, and Gary was coming from a school where he had built a program that was going to be ready to compete for Final Four. He had Jim Jackson coming in, and he already had a good team. And Ohio State had the biggest athletic budget in the country. But he felt loyalty to his alma mater, and he came back, and he was great. And he went to 2 Final Fours and won a national championship. Turgeon, who was kind of a reserved guy, not that Gary was all that outgoing, but he left his heart on the court as you saw him sweat through his suit every game. And Turgeon was a Midwest guy, and had never really coached at a basketball school before. He came from Texas A&M, which is where Buzz Williams came from. He'd been at Wichita State, and he was a Kansas native, and he always seemed like a Kansas guy. And he did well here. As much heat as he took, they made the tournament 5 years. In his 10 years at the school, they made the Sweet 16 in 2016 and probably would have made it in his last full year had COVID-19 not hit. I think he would have. That team was capable of getting to a Sweet 16 and maybe even beyond. So now he's going back to coaching. I didn't think he'd get back. He told people he loved living in Kensington. His family loved living in Kensington. He had no desire to coach anymore. But I guess the pull of his hometown was enough, and he's going to go to the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And the school is welcoming him as a native son, and it's the team is known as the Roos, RROS. His wife is from that area. Kids are grown, so why not? Yeah, that's where Mark Turgeon is right now, and I wish him success because I think he did. He didn't do the job that everybody expected. It's tough to follow a legend. He didn't inherit many players. Things had fallen off a little bit in Gary's end there, and I think there were like 7 scholarship players when Turgeon took over. It was a different era. You didn't bring them in, off the transfer portal now like they do it now, and the college basketball that he's stepping into, although it's a different level than coaching at Maryland or even Texas A&M. He's got to contend with NIL and the transfer portal and everything else that goes along with it. But I guess, the lure of his hometown and probably missing coaching. He did a little bit of broadcasting, wasn't particularly good at that. And I guess he felt like now's the time. He's 60 years old, and if he's ever going to coach again, now's the time to do it, and to do it in his hometown. Pretty good thing. And, I'll save this. There's an event going on tonight at Madison Square Garden that you probably want to know about. But more importantly, I'll tell you about why I think Vince Lombardi, who on this day was introduced by the Packers as their new head coach, still stands as the greatest coach of all time. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Well, you know what tonight is? The Westminster Dog Show, the 150th year for it, and it's taking place actually in 2 locations. I always thought they had it in just Madison Square Garden, but they're holding it at both the Javits Center, which is, I don't know, probably about 5-6 blocks away from the Garden, and the Garden, and the Best in Show. It's a 2-night event. The Best in Show will be awarded around 11 o'clock tomorrow night. I won't be up for that, but if I happen to graze across the channels and I land on the dog show, I will. Favorites this year, if you've been scouting this kind of thing, Comet, the Shih Tzu. I came close last couple of years. What about Neil, the Bichon Frise? Another 2025 finalist. Zeta, the Afghan Hound, won twice in the World Dog Show. Anyway, this is what surprised me most. There's about 2,500 dogs, they say, from 212 breeds, contestants from every state and 18 other countries. Joe Garagiola used to do this when it was on the USA Network many years ago. I don't even know who does it anymore. The movie Best in Show with Eugene Levy, which came out 25 years ago, that was great. That was a great movie. But here's how it's done. Dogs are judged against others of their breed. Then each breed winner goes up against others in its group, such as terriers or herding dogs. In the final round, these 7 group winners compete for Best in Show. At each level, judges decide which dog best matches the ideal or standard for its breed. Wire Fox Terriers have dominated this. They've won it 15 times, followed by Poodles of various size, 11. Here's the most surprising thing. No cash prizes. All that time and effort, no money, and except that the winner gets to direct a $5,000 Westminster donation to a training club or to the American Kennel Club Humane Fund. So there you go. Everything you wanted to know about the Westminster Dog Show. And if you have interest, it's going to be on, I don't know what channel, but it'll be on both tonight and tomorrow night with Best in Show to be awarded late tomorrow night. So it was on this day in 1959 that Vince Lombardi became the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers had been terrible the year before. They went 1-10-1. It was only 12 games in those days. Didn't go to 14 until 1961. So this was 2 years before that. Ray McClain fired after a 1-10-1 season. Vince Lombardi, who was somewhat known, he had been, though, but he had been an assistant coach. He'd been a successful high school coach in New Jersey, That led him to Army, where he worked under the legendary Red Blake. Then he went to the New York Giants and worked along Tom Landry, who was the defensive coordinator. Lombardi was the offensive coordinator. 1958, the very famous championship game won by the Baltimore Colts. And not long after that, I guess Landry must have stayed for the 59 season because he became coach of the Cowboys in 60. But Lombardi was older. He was 45 years old, and he'd never been more than a high school coach or an assistant at that point, and he knew time was running out. And so the Packers, the worst team in the NFL, the smallest market, guy who spent his whole life in New York City, the New York City area, is now going to go to what he called the end of the earth. But he wanted his shot, and as we heard in the treatment of NFL films, he thought he was ready for it.
I had felt that I had done what I could for the Giants, really, and I just felt that it was time for me to move, really, and I made it a point to try to move. I couldn't do anything with the Giants. I couldn't advance anymore. I had to be more or less accept what I was with the Giants, and that's what it was. And otherwise, I was status quo as far as the Giants were concerned. I wasn't going to be satisfied as an assistant coach, and I wanted to be a head coach of a professional football team, and Green Bay gave me the chance to be one.
In January 1959, Green Bay, Wisconsin saw the dawning of a new era. The smallest NFL city had seen its once proud franchise reduced to a last-place team that won a single game in 1958. Disgusted fans had seen enough and hung team president Dominik Olejniczak in effigy.
They were really in danger of actually losing their franchise. It was a very vulnerable situation.
We were hoping change would come. I get a kick out of people saying, well, we expected something. No one expected Coach Lombardi.
He was completely ready. He had a fire in him unlike any other coach. It's the fact that he had those 20 years in the vineyards, preparing himself, thinking that he was better than people realized. All of those frustrations made the great Lombardi possible.
When Lombardi came in, he said, I know there's a board of directors, and he says, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I'm in charge here.
Even though his only head coaching experience was limited to high school, 45-year-old Vince Lombardi also insisted on becoming general manager. Since the Packers were community-owned, it was up to the executive board and team president Olejniczak to address Lombardi's demands.
Olejniczak, he treated like a janitor.
Early on, they played a inter-squad game, and Lombardi sat up in the stands, and Olejniczak came down the next day, and he said, here's a list of things that the board of directors said were wrong. And Lombardi took the paper, crumpled it up, threw it on the ground. He says, I'll coach the damn team.
You got to remember something. Vince worked so hard to get where he got. Failure could not be an option because he always believed in his heart he'd never get another chance.
Tell you how proud we are to have you a part of the Packers, just as you should be proud to be here, to be a part of this team.
When he walked into the meeting, and he looked us right in the eye, he said, gentlemen, we're going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we won't catch it because nothing is perfect. But we're going to relentlessly, and that's how he blurted it, chase it, because in the process we will catch excellence. He said, I'm not remotely interested in being just good. Holy mackerel, man, I was just up like this. I didn't even need a seat to sit on. I was like this, ready to go.
In August 1959, Green Bay's new head coach opened his first training camp.
I was in a Marine boot camp for 2 years. I knew all about how tough it was, and these things were picnics compared to what he did.
He had the best conditioned team in the NFL. And realize this, off a 1-10-1 team, they went 7-5. The following year, they went to the NFL championship and played a close game against the Philadelphia Eagles. off those first 2 years, rebuilding, so to speak, where they go 7-5 and then make it to the title game, they win 5 of the next 7. 5 of the next 7, including the first 2 Super Bowls. And then Lombardi was burned out. I mean, he was still in his mid-50s. See, all this happens in a 10-year period. Gets the Packers job in 59, coaches the Redskins in 69, and dies. What an unbelievable decade that he has, including a year off where he's the Packers GM. But here's the thing. People will say, well, look at all the great players he had. Hall of Famers, Bart Starr, Max McGee, Paul Hornung, Jim Taylor, Jerry Kramer, Ray Nitschke, Forrest Gregg. Well, you know, who couldn't coach those guys? Well, you know what? All those guys, every single one of them was on that team that went 1-10-1 the year before he got there. So that's why I look at Lombardi and I say, look, he had players, but he made them into Hall of Famers. That's not to take anything away from Bill Walsh, who got Joe Montana in the 3rd round and maybe made him the greatest quarterback of all time, drafting Jerry Rice. That's not to say that Joe Gibbs wasn't a great coach, but he had Bobby Beathard getting the players. Don Shula, obviously a great coach, more wins than anybody else. But he had 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl championships with players, and I think a couple of them were already there when he got there. I think Greasy was, and maybe Zonka. So, you know, I think that if you look at Lombardi and the 5 championships, and people discount the 3 that he won before the first 2 Super Bowls, but he beat everybody he had to beat. There were no other games to win. And as we look back now, 66 years, think about that, 66 years when he became the coach of the Packers, all within well, it was 11 years when you count 69 and 59. But think about that. That decade establishes Lombardi as one of the greatest of all time. And when you look at championships, yes, Chuck Noll has 4 Super Bowls, Bill Belichick has 6, and next in line is Joe Gibbs at 3. But you should put Lombardi in there because in coaching 9 years with the Packers, winning 5? Are you kidding me? Whoa, a lot to think about. So anyway, that's how I put a bow on today. We get into the Super Bowl and more tomorrow. Bram is next, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.